Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Don't know if I'll be joined by Dee Pierce tonight. We'll just have to see about that. Meanwhile, our topics are DOGE and the Social Security Administration, debt crisis, not, multipolarity, two concepts of multipolarity, actually. Trump's strange curvatures. And also disarmament and Trump. So I hope you're interested in these topics. Hopefully I will be interested too. I'm going to share this to Facebook so people know we're here. And then I will get started. Well, it looks like I am being joined by Dee. So I will let her in. Hello, Dee.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We are live.
Yes.
Okay, at this point.
Yeah, so I got to share the show out.
Okay, I got to share the show out also. And we'll see each other back here in a moment.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shoot.
Oops. Expletive deleted.
Okay.
Okay, so as I was saying before you came aboard, we have a number of topics here tonight. One is DOGE and the Social Security Administration. The second is assume a debt crisis, or actually debt crisis not.
Mm-hmm.
Two concepts of multipolarity. Trump's strange curvatures. And finally, disarmament and Trump.
It's quite interesting, all the stuff going on.
Yeah, it is really interesting, isn't it?
Yes, and it's just a reaction of people. You know, this is, like you say, in some ways you agree with him with things, and other things, you know, you're furious. It's just the way it is with Trump.
I think things are still settling down, and the pattern of the administration hasn't been quite established yet. Trump is still experimenting with kind of certain stuff.
Right.
I think his deal with, with Elon Musk is an experiment. You know, he's trying to see what Musk can do And he's looking for the reaction of the public, to what Musk is doing.
Right.
And probably if the reaction is not what he wants, he'll probably throw Musk under the bus.
Oh, here we go. They're singing away. You have a music interlude.
Okay, it's these dogs.
Yes.
Here, hi.
They're singing the songs of their ancestors.
I'm going to share out the first piece. So Sandy's there. Sandy, please share. We have a party tonight.
Oh yeah, Sandy's a great sharer. She belongs to a lot of groups.
I know she's a great sharer. Okay, so I'm going to share the first of our pieces.
Okay, I'll put myself on mute.
Thank you. Which is about Elon Musk and the Social Security Administration. Okay, so there we are. The name of this piece is, no, that's something else from Common Dreams. Anyway, headline is Advocates Warn, quote, Musk is stealing your personal Social Security data, unquote, as DOGE infiltrates agency. What agency is that? Social Security Administration, the heart, the beating heart of the New Deal, the still beating heart. There is no way to overstate how serious a breach this is. And my understanding is that it has already occurred, said the president of Social Security Works. This is by Jake Johnson, and its byline is today, February 18th. News that the acting head of the Social Security Administration left up post this past weekend after facing off with Elon Musk's lieutenants over their efforts to access government records set alarm bells blaring, with advocates warning that the unelected billionaire is moving to seize highly sensitive data. Quote, there is no way to overstate how serious a breach this is, and my understanding is that it has already occurred, unquote, said Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, a progressive advocacy organization that warned late Monday that, quote, Elon Musk is stealing your personal Social Security data. Okay, Nancy Altman is like, she is a Ms. Social Security and has been so since the 1983 when she was instrumental in working on the compromise between Ronald Reagan, and Tip O'Neill that was so influential in forming the modern Social Security system. She's been a constant advocate of Social Security since then. She's the president of Social Security Works, of course, as I said already. It's important to recognize, I think, that if anybody has inside information about what's going on inside of the Social Security Administration, it's going to be Nancy Altman. So when she says, and my understanding is that it has already occurred, well, her understanding is probably pretty good. Not that there's no possibility she's wrong, but she probably got some information from people inside who know her very well. The Washington Post and other outlets reported Monday that Michelle King, a veteran of the Social Security Administration, SSA, left her position over the weekend after clashing with members of Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, an advisory commission known as DOGE that President Donald Trump has unleashed on federal agencies. New York Times reported that King stepped down after Musk's cronies sought access to, quote, an internal data repository that contains extensive personal information about Americans, unquote. That's you and me and just about everybody else who's ever worked and who therefore has a record with the Social Security Administration. In King's place, Trump installed Leland Dudek, described by the Post as a, quote, manager in charge of Social Security's anti-fraud office, unquote, to lead the Social Security agency until the permanent commissioner is confirmed. SSA administers retirement benefits and supplemental security income, SSI, for tens of millions, of Americans. If I have my figure correct, I think for retirement benefits alone, it administers that for 70 million Americans. Max Reichman, President and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, said in a statement that, quote, there is no justifiable reason for Musk and DOGE to have access to Americans' deeply personal information, unquote. Quote, seniors, people with disabilities, and Americans everywhere of good conscience should be on high alert, unquote, said Rickman. Quote again, a dedicated public servant resigns after more than 30 years due to the intrusive activities of Elon Musk and DOGE. That truly is a, quote, canary in the coal mine type of moment. Altman noted Monday that SSA, quote, has data on everyone who has a Social Security number, which is virtually all Americans, everyone who has Medicare, and every low-income American who has applied for, quote, SSI. Quote again, SSA has comprehensive medical records of people who have applied for disability benefits. It has our bank information, our earnings records, the names and ages of our children, and much more, unquote, said Altman. Quote, older people are disproportionately susceptible to scams. The data at SSA leaking would make the number of scams skyrocket, and if there is an intent to punish perceived enemies, someone could erase your earnings record, making it impossible to collect the Social Security and Medicare benefits you have earned. It's very personal to Bonnie and myself because, of course, we're both on Social Security and also we have Medicare Parts A, B, and I guess Part C, unfortunately. We were sort of forced into Part C, but that's another story. Altman told the Associated Press that, quote, if there is an evil intent to punish perceived enemies, someone could erase your earning records, making it impossible to collect the Social Security and Medicare benefits you have earned, unquote. Musk's team of dozens of staffers, many of whose identities are not publicly owned, have infiltrated departments across the federal government with the stated goal of rooting out waste and fraud, which critics say is merely a pretext for gutting critical programs that Trump and the unelected billionaire oppose. On Monday, advocacy groups filed an emergency lawsuit aiming to stop DOGE from accessing taxpayer data from the International Revenue Service. That's fine, but where's the lawsuit for the Social Security Administration, I'd like to know. Quote, hundreds of millions of Americans across the nation file taxes and provide sensitive personal information to the IRS, and they do so knowing that Congress has put in place protections to safeguard their data. DOGE is taking a wrecking ball to these protections and harming hardworking Americans and small businesses in the process, said Sky Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward. Quote, DOGE must not be permitted to trample on the American people's rights. That is why we are honored to represent our clients in this federal court challenge to put a stop to DOGE's lawless and harmful activities, unquote. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office last week, Musk claimed without evidence that his team uncovered, quote, crazy things, unquote, in a, quote, cursory examination of Social Security, unquote. What he meant, I think, was Social Security data. Quote, we've got people in there that are 150 years old, unquote, Musk said. Quote, now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay, they should be in the Guinness World of Records. And here's a tweet from Social Security Works, which even though Nancy Altman is the president, the current administrator of Social Security Works, in other words, the person who day-to-day runs the organization, is Alex Lawson. Anyway, there's a tweet from Social Security Works saying Musk is drawing on an old playbook of claiming that the government in general, and Social Security in particular, is full of, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse, unquote. Then when he steals your benefits, he will claim that he is simply cutting waste. And there's an article at thehill.com that says, Elon Musk is coming for your Social Security. Social Security has used his platform. Elon Musk has used his platform to spread false claims about Social Security, potentially leading to the theft of earned benefits. Wired reported that, quote, computer programmers quickly claimed that the 150 figure was not evidence of fraud, but rather the result of a weird quirk of the Social Security Administration's benefit systems, which was largely written in COBOL, a 60-year-old programming language that undergirds SSA's databases, as well as systems from many of the other U.S. government agencies, including, by the way, the Treasury and the Treasury payment system that DOGE has also been in creating all kinds of problems with. Quote, because COBOL does not have a data type, some implementations rely instead on a system whereby all dates are coded to a reference point. The most commonly used reference point is May 20th, 1875, as this was the date of an international standard study conference held in Paris, known as the Convention du Maître, Wired explained. Quote again, these systems default to the reference point when a birth date is missing or incomplete, meaning all of those entries in 2025 would show an age of 150, unquote. Quote, there's just one possible explanation for what DOGE allegedly found, the outlet added. Quote, Musk could also have simply looked up the SSA's own website, which explains that since September 2015, the agency has automatically stopped benefit payments when anyone reaches the age of 115. That is not good for Bonnie and I because we plan to live until we're 125, at least. Anyway, Musk, of course, before doing anything to Social Security, was too lazy to look at SSA's own website, right? You know that to be true. Too busy, too lazy, too uncaring, doing 150 things. Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, who served as SSA commissioner under the Biden administration, told the Post that Musk's team, quote, will break, unquote, the Social Security system if they're given unfettered access. Quote, they will break it fast, unquote, O'Malley warned, and quote, and there will be an interruption of benefits, unquote. So Dee, what did you think of that little piece?
Oh, okay. I thought I was still muted. I'm not muted.
Oh no, I didn't. I don't think that I muted you. You muted yourself last
Oh,
time.
I did. I'm not muted. Yeah, I'm not muted. I thought I was still muted.
No,
I really don't have too much to say.
you don't. Aren't you furious?
Yes, but it's just
I mean, you're furious. I'm furious. I am dreadfully furious. And Friar Steve says, "Hello, Doc. Hello, Dee." He says, "That's not true. It's already been disproven. They don't understand the coding of COBOL." And they're running around in all the federal agencies that have databases in COBOL. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. And then they'll blame someone else. They'll say it's somebody's fault. Sandy Degg said shared. Steve Wolfbrandt laughs. Friar Steve says good article, Doc. Sandy Degg says I missed it. You missed what?
the article because she was busy sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy. Okay, the link is in the description. You can easily pick it up. It's from Common Dreams. Okay.
Well, right now too, I'd seen some headlines with security clearances. Denying security clearances, and they're trying that avenue, which should have been first. But I guess they just rushed it to do all this stuff without having security clearances, and now it's the pushing of the security clearances and trying to ban people from that shouldn't be in different offices. They don't have a reason for.
Right. So what you're saying is they're trying to ban the people who are in there who do not have security clearances.
Right, and they
Right.
don't have a reason. Usually, when you get a security clearance, there's a reason why you need that security clearance, um, and then they do the background to assure that they can give you the security clearance.
Right.
But these
And the
people are
background
just not,
checks.
yeah, background check. But these people that are in these positions don't even have training for or any reason. They have no reason to be in there.
Uh, well, I'm sure they have a reason, but they're not telling us what that reason is. Okay. They know what the reason is, but they don't want to tell us what the reason is.
Right. But there's
Because
got to be a really an
we would find the reason to be illegitimate, which would make us even more furious.
mhm.
And by the way, I think there is a possibility of civil suit against all the employees who are going in disturbing, our private data. All we have to do is get their names. But there could be class action suits against them.
Right, because first of all, with the security clearances, they have to know why they need the security clearance. What is the reason for it?
Yes.
And if they're trying to sneak around it and don't give a reason,
Okay, but also it takes a while to get
I
a
know.
security clearance. Okay, I used to have one, and my first job out of school, after I got my PhD, okay, was a job with a defense contractor. Okay, and I remember they gave me a security clearance at first. They gave me a confidential clearance,
Mhm.
and they had a security officer on the spot at this company, and he was able to grant me a confidential uh, 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 classification as soon as I came in the door. okay, without, any vetting. But of course, I couldn't see sensitive data with the confidential clearance. I mean, I could only do the lowest level stuff. It was 3 months before my secret clearance came through. I mean, it took
Right.
a long time. They did, an exhaustive investigation and vetting. And, there hasn't been enough time in this administration to clear these people. So they are doing anything without vetting, without investigations. I'm sure there may be one or two of them who have security clearances from other jobs, but it's very likely that a lot of them don't have any clearances, and they have not been vetted. And so that's really terrible.
It is. It's not a good recipe.
Lana's here and says, I got here late from work. Shared for our Steve says,
Thank you.
uh, okay, somebody said, I am watching you on my TV. I feel like you're here in my living room.
That's cool.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I usually watch, YouTube stuff on my TV also. And it is a good feeling. Frosty said, I don't think Elon is telling Trump what he's doing. Trump had no idea of the meeting Elon held with the leader of India. Well, of course, from Elon's point of view, that would not be any business of Trump's. After all, he did that in his capacity as a private citizen, as a business owner. He went to meet with Modi. So why should he tell Trump? So that was good. So Fry Steve also said Hitler dismantled democracy in Germany in 57 days. I think that is the only guide Elon/Trump are using. Well, they may not be able to make it in 57 days. It may take them a bit longer. Fry Steve says, I sent you a document, Doc. Elon has been in contact with the Kremlin since 2022. I don't trust his intentions. Well, Friar Steve, I don't trust him at any level either. I mean, the guy is obviously a megalomaniac. He doesn't just want to be president of the United States. In fact, he knows he can't be president of the United States, so he'd rather just be dictator of the world. So I think there's that. Anyway, Lana says, got here late from work, shared. Thank you, Lana. And Sandy says, hi, Lana. So great. Okay, so that was the first piece for tonight. I thought I just had to cover that because it's really so egregious and we need an immediate lawsuit on it. So I think that's absolutely true. So let's get to our second piece. We have a lot of things to cover tonight. Our second topic. Okay, that one is debt crisis not, or also assume a debt crisis. And it's based on a piece by Stephanie Kelton from The Lens, which is her blog.
Okay.
Title of it is, I'm sorry, it's your turn, D.
Okay. Assume a debt crisis. How one bogus assumption drives the perception that America's debt is out of control. And as Joe said, Stephanie Kelton, it's February 17th, 2025.
Okay, and who is Stephanie Kelton for those who do not know?
Oh, she's an economic professor. She's she's very good at teaching monetary MMT.
Right, and she has written the best-selling book, on MMT, and the name of it is the Deficit Myth,
Yeah, she's very good. She's a very good teacher.
and a very clear writer, as you will see from this particular blog. And she's one of our favorite persons around here.
Yes, and I've watched her over and over again. Her YouTube videos that she has. She's very good at teaching.
Yes, her YouTube video is extremely good. And also, she has a film out that she made on MMT, and the name of it is Finding the Money. It's available from Amazon at this point, may even be more freely available. I don't know if it's yet around for free, but it may be. So if you Google Finding the Money on YouTube, you'll be able to see this great film, okay, on MMT, that she was a leading figure in actually getting out there. Okay, she wasn't the producer, but she's definitely the star of the film.
Oh,
So please
here
go.
we go. Yesterday, I wrote about the debt scolds who keep pointing to images like the one below as evidence of a looming debt problem. If you read through the Congressional Budget Office's long-term budget outlook, you'll see a sense of why they continue to paint a gloomy picture of America's finances, a combination of too much spending and not enough revenue. A casual observer might look at the chart and wonder, why would anyone expect the federal debt as a share of the GDP to march steadily higher over the next 30 years? It looks like nothing like we experienced over the last 90 years.
Right. So she goes back to 1944 or even a little before 1944. Okay, in this graphic. Okay, and you notice that as a percent of GDP, the federal debt hits a high point in like 1945, and then it goes down and down and down and down and down. And then suddenly in the 2000s, roughly 2008, it starts to climb again and it goes up and up. And so then CBO is projecting it all the way up based on a relatively short period of time. Why are they projecting it all the way up? In fact, right now, it's even been going down a little. Went down a little there, okay, and then there's a slight rise up, at the line. And on the basis of that slope for a year or two, they're projecting it out to infinity. Well, not to infinity, but they're projecting it out to 150%. Looks like 150% or something like that. Now, why should they be doing that? Stephanie asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, please go on.
The role of assumptions. If you're going to engage in an exercise like projecting the long-term debt ratio, and I don't recommend it, then you're going to have to make a lot of assumptions. That includes closing your eyes and assuming certain things won't happen, e.g., wars, recessions, and pandemics. These things obviously do happen, and they clearly impact spending and revenue when they do, but they're difficult, if not impossible, to see coming. So CBO assumes them anyway. The same goes for technological breakthroughs or even events that could bring a period of unexpectedly strong growth. In other words, the future path of debt GDP will depend critically on what actually happens to the denominator.
Yes,
That's
what
what,
happens to GDP?
yes. That's why Democrats and Republicans often talk about, quote, growing our way out of debt. If you can engineer policies to really juice the denominator, GDP, the ratio will come down. Problem solved.
But she has problem in quotes,
Yes,
in scare quotes, which means she doesn't think it's a problem. But anyway,
right.
go on.
But is there a problem to solve? I don't believe there is, as I wrote yesterday.
Okay,
Meanwhile,
he has a link to yesterday's post, and
yes.
then he quotes it.
Meanwhile, the so-called national debt remains nothing more than a historical record of US dollars that have been spent by government and not taxed away from us over the centuries. That's centuries.
That's
Pa-
centuries, yet since the founding of the republic.
yes, part of our financial savings. The coveted RG debt sustainability condition continues to hold. Using treasuries and paying interest remains a policy choice.
I should explain that. Okay, R is the interest rate. Okay, G is the growth rate. And the sign, okay, right there in the middle is the less than sign. So the coveted R less than G debt sustainability condition, she says, continues to hold.
Hmm.
Please go on.
Okay, where was it? Can always be achieved by design, and the numbers used to generate CBO's scary debt graph are completely bogus. But it's hard to overcome the perception of a debt problem when a picture is worth 1,000 words. What almost no one seems to realize is that there's completely bogus assumption driving the entire image. Read that again. Yes, a bogus assumption driving the entire image. I discovered this when I was working as the chief economist for the Democrats on the U.S. Senate Budget Committee in 2015. We were preparing for a hearing, and I was emailing back and forth with Stephen Goss, who was the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration at the time. Lawmakers were obsessed with CBO's long-term debt chart, but something about it just didn't make sense. When I finally hit on the right question, Goss replied, "Exactly. I couldn't believe what he went on to explain to me. CBO's charts looked the way it did because of a totally bogus assumption." I don't recall CBO acknowledging this so explicitly back in 2015, but here's a passage from their latest long-term budget report, my emphasis. In accordance with statutory requirements, CBO's projections reflect the assumptions that current laws generally remain unchanged, that some mandatory programs are extended after their authorization lapse, and that spending on Medicare and Social Security continues as scheduled, even if their trust funds are exhausted.
Right, and that final assumption that spending on Medicare and Social Security continues as scheduled, even if the trust funds uh, 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 um, are exhausted, that's the key assumption.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that's not consistent with the other assumptions that the law is made the same. Okay, in other words, that assumption is that just that law changes, or just that law is broken. Okay.
What Gost explained is that the most ambiguous, quote, proof of a debt problem derives from an assumption that the government will violate the law. As I've explained countless times, the federal government has the financial ability to pay, but not the legal authority to pay certain benefits once the trust funds associated with those programs are exhausted. Instead of doing what it has always done in the past, raise the payroll tax or make other adjustments, CBO assumes the government will borrow trillions of dollars and carry on paying promised benefits in full, something it does not have the authority to do under current law. When I realized what was going on, I explained it to a friend who decided to interview Goss and write the whole thing up for an article in The Nation. I tried to link to that article yesterday, but something went wrong, and many of you wrote to tell me that the link was broken. Sorry about that. Here it is again. Let me quote from the article. The numbers relied upon, and then his former Senate Budget Committee Chair Mike Enzi and far too many others inside the Beltway, including the Congressional Budget Office itself, are completely bogus. The methodology used by the CBO to create these projections exaggerates the federal government's long-term debt projection by as much as 440%, creating a phony fiscal crisis where none exist. As it turned out, Goss had explained all of this to lawmakers. He shared a PowerPoint presentation that he created to show members of Congress what the picture would look like if CBO assumed that the government would follow the law. Instead, I didn't finish,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that they would follow the law instead of violating it. If when we reach the point of exhausting the trust funds, here's what he showed lawmakers. Federal debt held by the public, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, held
federal
by the
debt
public.
held by the public versus debt as a percentage of GDP. Okay, the red line shows debt as a percentage of GDP continuing to go up. Using the assumption that they're going to break the law. But the blue line shows, without assuming added deficit spending from Social Security and Medicare Part A, and that shows, of course, okay, the blue line shows uh, uh, that there's a decline, okay, in the debt to GDP ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if they follow the law, there's going to be a decline. Okay, now they could make a change, okay, and not actually break the law. And the change would be to do one of two things that we've spoken of here countless times. Okay, that would be to mint a platinum coin to continue to fund Social Security, to put the proceeds, okay, to credit the trust fund with the proceeds from the platinum coin. Of course, you'd have to change the law to do that. Okay, the other thing is that Congress could order the Federal Reserve to put the new funds into the Social Security Trust Fund, or to credit the Social Security Trust Fund, okay, with new funds each year as time goes on, so that there are, quote, funds, unquote, in the Social Security Trust Fund. Of course, there are never any funds in the Social Security Trust Fund. It's just an accounting record. But the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, and the Social Security Administration could be ordered to credit the Social Security Trust Fund each time a platinum coin is minted to cover Social Security expenditures. Or if you don't want to use the platinum coin solution, the other solution that you could use is Congress could, simply order the Fed to create the needed money to supplement Social Security each year, and then the Treasury could be ordered to credit the Social Security Trust Fund with those amounts, and then also to spend those amounts in Social Security each year. That wouldn't be breaking law, it would be changing law. So anyway, going on with Stephanie's thing.
Okay. Quoting, did I do that already? Okay, quoting from The Nation. The data shows that starting in 2032, the federal government's debt held by the public is on track to rapidly decline as a share of GDP, bottoming out at 40%. This is a stark contrast to the CBO's sharply rising debt to GDP ratio, which speaks at 176% in 2090. So there you have it. The entire quote problem derives from an assumption. We all know what happens when you assume, right? That the
Yes,
government will do
pass
so.
that you and me.
Yes. That the, that the government will do something it isn't allowed to do under current law.
Right, and it's important to point out that that assumption is inconsistent with what CBO normally does when they want to project something out, okay, to the future. In other words, when they want to do it, what they usually do is to do it in accordance with current law. But in this case, their projection is not in accordance, okay, with current law because they made a contradicting assumption. Okay, so why did they do it? Because obviously they wanted to get people to think that there's a fiscal crisis there that doesn't exist. So, okay, please go on, D.
If you adopt the MMT lens, then you'll discover an array of other problems with CBO's methodology, as Scott Fulweiler has shown. You'll also understand why the U.S. won't face a debt crisis even under the path envisioned in CBO's latest forecast. But the perception of an ever-rising debt ratio is cause for concern, and it's easily weaponized to shape public opinion and justify gutting programs that millions of Americans rely on. We should acknowledge it's a deceptive underpinnings, even as we work to advance a better understanding of the mechanics of public finance and the real limits on government spending. Well, it's used for, like, we talk about austerity measures.
Yes, it is very useful to talk about austerity measures and why there's no reason for the austerity measures.
Exactly.
Uh, Once I wrote a piece, it's still up on Daily Costs in my blog over there. Uh, okay, look up uh, Let's Get It Done, okay, at Daily Cost. That's the handle I used over there. Okay, but I wrote a blog on the right ratio, the value. It was called the value of the right uh, ratio, and the blog was a critique of the debt to GDP ratio. Of
Hmm.
course, okay, I made the point, okay, that the debt to GDP ratio is actually um, um, uh, 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 inconsistent because the debt is a stock and GDP is a flow of money. Okay, so you're contrasting a stock with a flow of money, uh, rather than contrasting a stock to a stock, okay, and a flow to a flow. Okay, but what I also did in that particular article, I asked the question of what was the purpose of the debt to GDP ratio. And its purpose, okay, is evidently to show that somehow uh, there's a relationship, between the rising debt and the government's capacity to pay the debt, because the assumption is there that somehow the government has to earn the income to pay the debt. So that it's important that the interest rate, the rise, okay, in interest payments uh, is lower than the rise in income. Okay. However, that assumes, of course, that somehow the government has to earn the money to pay back the debt and to pay back the interest on the debt. Okay. But the point is that is not true. Reason why it's not true is because government can always create the money it needs to pay the debt at any given time or over a period of time. Okay, so what I argued, okay, in that particular blog, uh, uh, was that what you had to do was to use some other ratio, Okay, and the other ratio was the ratio of the debt uh, to the capacity of the government, to actually create money. It turns out that the capacity of the government to create money is virtually limitless. So the denominator of that particular ratio should be equal to zero, uh, 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 because the size, okay, of the denominator is so large. Okay, so basically the debt to capacity ratio, let's call it, uh, for a monetary sovereign nation, okay, is always at zero. It never changes. It doesn't matter how large the debt gets. It doesn't matter how large, okay, the debt to GDP ratio gets. I'm sorry. Uh, doesn't matter how large, okay, the debt gets, because since the value, okay, of the denominator is infinity, the ratio is always at zero, no matter how large the debt is. So that's the argument I made in that particular blog. I still like that argument. Uh, I think the value of the right ratio is always zero for a monetarily sovereign government like the United States. So I will conclude our treatment of Stephanie's article with that particular remark. Have you got any comments on her article, Dee?
I'm, I thought it was really good, and I like the way she words things, and especially assumption. The assumption.
Yes. Yes, the assumption that makes an ass out of you and me.
Exactly, and that's exactly what they do.
And that's exactly what they did here.
Yes.
Yeah, they made an ass out of us and they made an ass out of them because they had no business making that assumption.
Right.
And it was inconsistent with their normal methodology for projection. But they were interested in creating a basis for terrorism over the debt. And they've been doing it for years and years and years and years. And it's a scandal.
Oh, it is. What used to be referred to as public money was changed to the wording of taxpayer money,
Yes, yes, yes.
and all under the whole neoliberalism. How are you going to sell neoliberal austerity to the public?
Right. Just call everything taxpayer money. And politicians are still calling it taxpayer money. But politicians across the spectrum. It's
Mm-hmm.
not only the right wing politicians who refer to it as taxpayer money, all the progressive politicians are calling it taxpayer money as opposed to public money.
I know, it's infuriating.
It's infuriating. They cannot leave the meme taxpayer money alone because they have to make people feel they're paying this with my money.
Right.
No, they're not paying it with your money. They're paying it with newly created money from the Federal Reserve all the time. And once you realize that, you realize there's no reason for austerity. All I got to do is tell the Federal Reserve to produce the money necessary to support whatever program they want to support. The only thing to worry about, the only restriction is inflation. And if there's going to be inflation, then you have to take some countermeasures to take away the inflation. Okay, anything else to say about this?
You have some comments here. Oh,
Okay.
and tell those that don't know what the federal government does with the good all that money people think they're sending the federal government in taxes.
Oh, when the tax revenues are deposited by the federal government in the Treasury spending account, the process of bank settlement destroys the taxpayer dollars. So the taxpayer dollars never pay for anything. Once those dollars are destroyed, however, the Federal Reserve creates entirely new dollars in equal amounts so the Treasury can pay for things. That is what happened. And that, by the way, was that insight was actually produced by Stephanie Kelton herself in an article she wrote in 1998. Okay, and the article is entitled something like uh, "Can Tax Revenue Finance Federal Spending?" It's a title like that. It's not exactly that. I've forgotten specifically the title of that. But that article is a very, very important article. It goes through the logic of what I just said very, very carefully. And she was the first one to discover that taxpayer money is actually destroyed by the Federal Reserve as a matter of the accounting that the Federal Reserve actually uses. That article is now, since 1998, it's now, what is it, 27 years old, or roughly, 27 years old. And most people still don't know about that article and still don't accept its conclusion. And she did it 27 years ago. And she must be getting tired of repeating herself by now.
But the people are so indoctrinated over the years. The brainwashing.
Yes, they are. They're so indoctrinated. So let's get to where we are here. Uh, yeah. And Lana says she missed the first article. Yeah, the first article was about the activities of DOGE in the Social Security Administration. It was a Common Dreams article, and there's a link to it, okay, in the description. Saying this, Elon let his kid pick his nose in the Oval Office. The kid wiped his snot on the president's desk, then told Donald he wasn't the president. And Donald didn't have the guts to fire Elon Musk right then and there. Sandy Degg said, she's amazing. That's comment about, of course, our friend Stephanie Kelton. Friar Steve says, Elon believes that he can be dictator of Mars and occupier of a planet. Elon is a danger to all humanity and to all free beings. I think he is. Okay, I think the Russians and the Chinese are probably going to object to his becoming the dictator of Mars. On a side note, Passover countdown in 53 days, April 12th to April 20th. Free the red heifers in Shiloh. Great. I'm looking forward to it, the red heifers again.
I know.
Steve Wolfbrand says, hi, Lana. Lana says, wow, she called the CBO bogus. Gasp, gasp. Sandy Degg says, laugh out loud. And Frosty says, for perspective, government debt stood at $9.2 million in 2008, and in 1981 it crossed the $1 trillion mark for the first time. I believe that was Reagan because he gave tax breaks to rich and spent enormous amounts of money on SDI. Didn't Bush have to raise taxes? Do you think if Democrats take back the White House, they can raise taxes again? They ought to raise taxes if that becomes necessary to control inflation. There's a second reason to raise taxes, and this should be really serious. That's to see that the power of the billionaires, okay, to influence elections okay, is actually removed. What do you have to do that? You have to ensure there are no billionaires. You have to tax all their wealth away. Are the Democrats going to be able to do it? Not unless there's a huge victory for Democrats, sweeping Republicans out of the House, the Senate, the presidency, and then there's an effort by the Congress first to load the Supreme Court with people who will respect what Congress does. And at that point, it would be possible for Congress to tax away the billions so there are no billionaires anymore. We have to understand that billionaires and democracy do not mix. They cannot exist side by side. And the story of what's been happening to democracy here in the United States since the 1980s is the story of how billionaires are destroying democracy. Do I think Democrats can take back the White House? They can raise taxes again. They got to take back Congress, and they have to have large majorities in Congress to raise taxes again, for Steve. And they also have to pack the Supreme Court just to make sure that taxation is not judged unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Lana says, I like to remind people that all of our dollars are federal debt that doesn't earn interest, and that no debt exists in a vacuum. All debt has a corresponding asset somewhere. Federal debt is our collective asset. That becomes especially clear if you understand that money, even the cash money in your hand, okay, is a liability of the federal government. It's a liability of the federal government because the federal government has to take it in payment of taxes. That's why it constitutes a liability of the federal government. When the federal government issues money, it is issuing a liability. Not your liability, but its liability. Its liability is your asset. Federal debt is our collective asset. It's a collective asset when it's a debt instrument that earns interest, and it's an asset when it's a liability, such as a dollar, that does not earn interest. Lana says, remember to mention your books on how to fix the debt and where to buy them. All my Kindle books, are at Amazon. All my books, on MMT, are Kindle books. And the outstanding one, I guess, concerning the debt is Fixing the Debt Without Breaking America. I wrote that book originally in 2013 and revised it at the beginning of 2014. The edition of it, which is up on Amazon now, is the 2014 edition. It has a very lengthy appendix on various ways to cover the deficit or to pay down the debt. That book doesn't have one way that I wrote about at a later time, and that way is what I call overt congressional financing. And you'll find articles on overt congressional financing at my blog, which is at josephmfirestone.com. Thank you for reminding me, Lana. Sandy says, I wonder if Trump knows MMT. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know MMT, but he does know that the government can print, its own money, because when he first came into office, he let slip that he understands that. And then people kept on shushing him about that. Don't say that, don't say that. So he doesn't say it anymore. But I'm sure he still believes it. He knows the government is able to create its own money. I've never heard that before, Doc, about the tax dollar. I'll have to look that up. Okay. Let me do something now then. Levy WP 244. The title of her article is Can Taxes and Bonds Finance Government Spending? It's dated 1998. And I'm going to give you the link address to it right now. I will put it in the comments. It's a direct link to it. Okay, it's a PDF. Okay, I will also put a link to my book, Fixing Debt, Kindle book. Fixing the Debt Without Breaking America. Let me get that link for you. That's one of 7 books I've written on MMT. They're all ebooks, and they all cost $9.99. This is the only book yet on the platinum coin. Okay, so there are the links. So let us now go on. We still have a lot more to cover tonight. But thank you very much, Lana, for reminding me to remind people occasionally about my various books. And so now we're going to move to the international relations part of the show. And this is an article from the Geopolitical Economy Report. And it's by the editor and publisher of the report, who is Ben Norton. The title is What is a Multipolar World? China says equality. Trump and Marco Rubio say imperial rivalry. So that's really the main point of the article, right there. Expand it a little bit. That tagline is, what is the meaning of multipolarity, quote unquote? Donald Trump and Marco Rubio say great power competition, unquote, with imperial spheres of influence. China and much of the global south have an anti-imperialist view, quote, equality among all countries regardless of size. It's important for everybody to understand that when China and much of the global south are talking about having a multipolar world, that is their vision of it. Ben says, it is now widely acknowledged the world is multipolar. This is so uncontroversial that the Munich Security Conference chose the title. The title, is multipolarization, quote unquote, for its 2025 annual report. But Ben rightly notes, however, there is not a common definition of multipolarity. The Munich Security Report noted that while, quote, the world's multipolarization is a fact, unquote, quote, international system shows elements of unipolarity, bipolarity, multipolarity, and nonpolarity, unquote, in which, quote, multiple order models coexist, compete, or clash, unquote. Governments have radically different understandings of the meaning, of multipolarity. The definition used by the United States and especially by the Donald Trump administration is the opposite of the idea, of multipolarity advocated by China. When China talks about a multipolar world, it means one without imperialism and without hegemony, with, quote, equality among all countries, regardless of size, unquote, where all nations have an equal voice in multilateral institutions and can pursue their own independent path of development without foreign intervention. By the way, this is the concept which underlies the United Nations. Under the Charter of the United Nations, all nations, are equal, with the exception that in the Security Council there are permanent members. But in the General Assembly, all the nations, are equal. Quote, rivalry between big powers had brought disaster to humanity, unquote, warned China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Quote, equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal rules should become the basic principles of a multipolar world, unquote, he argued, calling for, quote again, greater democracy in international relations. This is a view shared by many global South countries, by Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega, leader of the Sandinista revolution, has an anti-imperialist view of multipolarity. He argued that, quote, a new order is being born in the world that buries imperialism, buries the colonialists, and opens the way to a democracy of nations, a multipolarism that is manifesting itself in various ways. But he cautioned that, quote, on the other hand, we see North American imperialism trying to maintain its hegemony at all costs, even at the risk of sinking its own economy, unquote. The view in Washington could hardly be more different, says Ben, when U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio talks about the multipolarity. He means that there are now other great powers capable of challenging the dominance of the United States. The conclusion of the Trump administration is that the U.S. must reassert its imperial, quote, sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. This is why Trump is so aggressively threatening Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Panama, and other countries in Latin America. In other words, China has an anti-imperialist view of a multipolar world, whereas Trump and Rubio believe it means a return to great power competition and inter-imperialist rivalry. Beijing sees multipolarity as a desirable step towards international cooperation and development that will encourage peace. Washington sees multipolarity as a threat to its hegemony that will foster further conflicts. Okay, so this is a very long article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I recommend it to you, and the link, of course, is in the description. But that's the essence of the idea. I do want to point out that months and months ago, when I did my first stream on the issue of multipolarity, I pointed out that one danger, of a multipolar world is that it would be interpreted in the context of the balance of power of politics that governed the world order in the 19th century. And that in that particular balance of power of politics, there were spheres of influence. And I pointed out in that stream that when there are great powers and there are spheres of influence, the interests of the smaller powers are sacrificed, and frequently in situations like that, or maybe even not so frequently, but eventually there are wars. And I pointed out that that was the way the European order was run from the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, uh, uh, until the advent of uh, 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 um, uh, um, of the Napoleonic Wars, and the threat from France to dominate all of Europe, at the end of the 1890s, of the 1790s, and the early years of the 1800s. And then when the threat of France was destroyed by the conservative powers, in 1815, uh, uh, there was then a period, of multipolarism again from 1815 to 1914. And there were no great wars during this period, except the Crimean War of 1854. But there was, competition among the powers, and peace proved to be unsustainable. And it was the rivalry among the great powers that caused the advent, of World War One and the failure of that particular multipolar system. Uh, then we had actually pretty much a period of chaos, which ended with the end, of World War II. And then we had, of course, the unipolar system, which the United States, well, it wasn't a unipolar system, it was a bipolar system, where the United States and the Soviet Union were the two main powers. And eventually the Soviet Union broke up, at the end of the 1980s and early in the 1990s. And then for a period of time, we had, a unipolar world, which began to break up, I suppose, and has been breaking up since 2008. It's very important that in going back to a multipolar world, we do not have the kind of multipolar world which existed in the 19th century, but we have the kind of multipolar world which is envisioned by Beijing right now. In my earlier stream, I said I feared, that wasn't, that it might be inherent, in multipolarity, that conflicts, were going to emerge, and that eventually we would arrive at a system similar to the European system in the 19th century, and that would eventually prove to be unsustainable. I still believe that, but I also believe that if the Chinese interpretation of multipolarity prevails, then this might eventually lead us to a world government, which I believe is eventually what we need, but only after a great deal more in the way of economic integration that we have now, and a great deal more of cultural integration, okay, than we have now. I suspect we're about 100 years away from a world government. Uh, in the meantime, we will have a multipolar situation. And if we have great power competition, we will probably never get to a world government. But if we have the Chinese ideal as stated here in this particular report, then I think eventually we will have a chance to form a world government, which I hope is the ultimate fate of humankind. So I'm going to leave it there and take your comments. Oh, there are no comments about that. I expected a world of comments on that. Doesn't Ben Norton also work for RT? No, I don't think he does any longer, but he's getting a PhD degree in China, and he's living in China now. Okay, he may have written an article or two for RT at some point, but he is not in general supported, okay, by RT. He is supported by the earnings of his blog, okay, and his streams, because people contribute, and that is how his main way of supporting himself, okay, I believe. But he may have some grants that he's gotten from the Chinese to go to school there. Anyway, he's going to have a PhD from one of the Chinese schools. I don't know, exactly which one. He may give details on his blog concerning this. Okay, that's the only comment we have on this, D, which surprises me. Have you any comments on this idea or this post?
I remember the show when you talked about that with the multipolar world, what your concerns were.
Yes.
I remember that, and like I said, it all depends on how the different countries, if they don't let their egos getting in the way of things, and and just looking at things for the public good and the good of all.
Yes. Yes, I completely agree with that. But we already know that probably the interpretation of multipolarity we will get from Marco and from Trump is the competitive interpretation of multipolarity, which used to prevail, okay, in the 19th century, because especially for people who have studied the development, okay, of international relations and international systems, they were very well versed in terms of looking at the world in the way the nations saw it, during the 19th century. So that will be a natural way for them to think about it, and they'll probably compete on that sort of basis. And the Chinese will have to counter that with, such things as, the Belt and Road Initiative, the various transportation corridors, under development at this time. Generally speaking, the collaborative projects, that uh, 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 bring all nations together. And hopefully, rather than being left out of all this, uh, some administration of the future will decide we really need to join, this kind of world, and will bring us into the collaborations which we're seeing now, with respect to the BRICS nations. So, okay, I offer that as a possibility, but of course, I think, okay, MAGA will have to be defeated, okay, in order to get there. Uh, and someone will have to come into the presidency who has this kind of ideal, okay, in mind. And I hope there are some people active in politics now who have this kind of ideal in mind. There are some new people who have joined Congress, okay, and are very promising, and some other people retain uh, a measure of vision, okay, and idealism. And maybe something will emerge from them over the next
Hmm.
4 years or so. And maybe we will get a president and a Congress in 2029 that can share the vision that China has at this point. I hope so. Okay, let's get on then.
Okay.
We want to share the screen, I think, for a
Yes.
okay by Alistair Crook. It's
Okay.
called Trump's Shocking Curvatures. D.
Okay, I gotta get back to my seat again. I had to let the dogs in.
Okay,
So,
and so you are up.
okay.
I have it shared on the screen.
Okay. Okay. Trump's shocking curvatures. Alistair Crook. Yes, February 18th. U.S. aid. Quote, this is Putin and Trump's world now, end quote.
Yes.
Trump and his team have been busy dismantling and exposing to public view the mechanism to the all-encompassing narrative control machine which has been shown to be both authoritarian and industrial in its global scope. The Musk investigations have begun to peer into the U.S. aid complex. They reveal a system that Musk and President Trump postulate is one fully designated to generate fraud. The big question, however, is not that U.S. aid has been a sub-silo for CIA. That is not revelatory. What is revealing, however, is the evidence that U.S. aid was so heavily involved in domestic influence operations. This latest aspect serves to highlight USAID's relationship with the CIA and the fact that the CIA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and USAID were one big intelligence community structure, held together in flimsy legal terms by the Office of Director of National Intelligence, the role that Tulsi Gabbard will fill now she has been confirmed in post. Trump's insistence on Gabbard for the post reflects his absolute need for intelligence, quote, truth, but it's also likely that the DNI will become the focus for unscrambling and revealing the shadow intelligence control machine that is twin to the narrative manipulation complex. Likely most revelations will follow as part of a carefully managed release of further exposés, adding to the atmosphere of a breathless hurling towards a new era and keeping the opposition off balance. The Spectator magazine correctly observes that the head-spinning acceleration towards a new era is not confined to America, Canada, Greenland, and Panama. Quote, there is a wind of change blowing through the West. It emanates from Washington, D.C., Gavin Mortimer writes. A number of EU leaders congregated last weekend at a Patriots for Europe summit in Madrid. Geert Wilders declared, quote, we are living in an historic age, and my message to all the old leaders from Macron to Schultz to your own Pedro Sanchez. It's time. It's over now. They are history. Viktor Orban said, quote, "The Trump tornado has changed the world in just a few weeks. Yesterday we were heretics. Today we're mainstream." Marie, Marine Le Pen claimed that the West is, quote, "facing a truly global turning point." Meanwhile, the European Union seems to be in a state of shock. In the concessious Brussels view, however, Trump isn't an aspiring figure, but an antagonizing one. Nonetheless, in the US, the first CBS YouGov snapshot poll shows what public sentiment thinks of Trump. 69% see him as tough, 63% as energetic, 60% as focused, and 58% as effective. What did you say about the, what is that, 11 is overall job rating stands at 53%. Just how Trump would like his image to be, we imagine.
Okay, I do want to point out that the 53% job rating, which I assume is the approval rating, is certainly one of the highest, if not the highest, that Trump has ever enjoyed. When it comes to approval of Trump in his first term, he hardly ever got over 50%. He was usually somewhere in the 40s, and quite often he was down in the bottom 40s and the high 30s. So 53% really means that among the people themselves, this period is a honeymoon period for Trump. Okay, now I know there's been tremendous feelings of unrest that have been created by the activities of Elon Musk. At this point, I think it's probably too early to see the effects, in the polls. I know that Musk's approval rating has been falling like a stone. I don't know whether that's extended to Trump yet, but I expect that in just a few weeks from now, we will see that effect in the approval ratings of Trump also, because Musk is just hurting too many people and striking fear into the hearts of others. Like I know for those on Social Security, last night when we heard about uh, uh, their infiltration into the SSA, we had a long discussion here uh, ourselves about that. And I had to point out to Bonnie that it would probably be some time before they could get to the point of actually stopping the payments on Social Security, because uh, it doesn't take too much sense, to realize that if those payments are stopped for a large number of people, uh, there will be such a level of dissatisfaction as Trump and his followers have never experienced, in this country, because this won't be a partisan dissatisfaction. It's going to hit. It's it's going to hit most of the U.S. families if those payments are stopped. Because not only are 70 million people on Social Security and some more millions, on SSI, but all of the people who are on Social Security, uh, uh, most of them anyway, have children, have families. And if the payments to older people are cut off, that's going to have an economic impact on their families, on Democrats, uh, on Republicans, on independents, uh, across the board. Because without Social Security, a huge number of people will be homeless. They won't be able to pay rent. They won't be able to pay for food, and that burden of helping to support them will be thrown on their families. And their families will hate the people who have exposed them to that kind of situation. The hate and rage that will be visible in this country if that kind of thing happens is not something that Trump and Musk are able to envision or to imagine. They just don't have the empathy to imagine it. But if they do that, they will experience it in all manner of ways. Please go on, D.
Trump's showman image and shock psychotherapy clearly works for domestic America. In the world beyond, it is another story.
Okay, I guess I disagree with Alistair about that. Uh, his shock uh, psychotherapy is beginning not to work. Okay, when it comes to domestic America, and I think if there's another 2 or 3 months of this, it will be quite clear that it doesn't work. For domestic America. Please go on, though.
In the world beyond, it's another story. There they have only Trump's, quote, reported rhetoric by which to judge. They do not get to see the full theatrical global leadership show. So this conjuring is understood more literally, and the rest of the world is only too aware of America's history of broken words and withdrawal from agreements. Overs- Overseas, Trump sticks with the same strategy of presenting shock interventions, or rather an image. Gaza, for example, of an aspirational outcome that is intended to be novel and to evoke surprise and even shock. The purpose seemed to be a toss and psychological grenade into congealed and stifled political paradigms, hoping to find movement and intending perhaps to trigger change conversions. There could
Convers-
be validity to such an approach. What?
I said
Okay, there
conversations.
can be validity to, yeah, change conversations, yes. There can be validity to such an approach, providing it does not just stick a wrench into complex geopolitics. And for Trump, this is a real danger. Advancing extreme and unrealistic notions that can simply confuse and undermine confidence that his outcome could be realistic. The inescapable fact is that the three key foreign policy issues which Trump faces, however, are not conversations. They relate to existential wars, to death and destruction, and wars are not so susceptible to offhand grenade tossing. Worse, careless words fired from the hip have real import and may produce unintended and distinctly adverse consequences. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas remains close to the brink of collapse as, quote, the magician Netanyahu continues working to sabotage it. Nevertheless, Hamas's pressure in recent days worked, and the ceasefire for now continues. Trump may have believed that by unilaterally raising the stakes, demanding publicly for the release of all Israeli hostages this Saturday, thereby collapsing a complex process down to just one single release, he would be able to bring more hostages home quicker. However, in so threatening, he risks the complete collapse of the deal, since the release of the Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails and the withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza in Phase 2 form the absolute bedrock to Hamas's continued participation in the negotiations. Any resulting resumption of the Israeli destruction of Gaza would also constitute a black stain on Trump's aspirations to end wars. but he would then own the consequences to a renewal of war in the Middle East. Netanyahu's principal concern primordially lies with not completing the deal, but with the continued survival of his government. This was the meaning to his statement in reaction to Trump's threats, hell let loose, that Israel would halt negotiations on phase 2 of the Gaza deal, and in Netanyahu echoing of Trump's demand that Hamas release, quote, all the hostages on Saturday or else. The Israeli government, however, duly has backtracked under pressure from Hamas. Israel officials report has conveyed that the message to Hamas that the ceasefire will continue should the 3 hostages be released this Saturday. Well, it is now obvious from Trump's Trump's team's discourse that the U.S. is intent to present a new face to the coming multipolar world. Quote, with multi-great powers in different parts of the planet. As Marco Rubio outlined in a recent interview, it is also true, however, that the change was driven, in fact, by a seismic shift in how the world views America. Rubio effectively admits to this truth when he adds that the post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon being used against us. Some members of the Trump team, however, persist with threats, inflicting maximum pain bombings to extinction that hark back to the old era of U.S. imperium. That is to say, some of Trump's team repeat Rubio's rubric well enough, but without showing any indication that they have been affected or transformed by the new understanding. The seismic shift is two-way. The world is in a new era too. It has had enough of Western unilateral impositions. It is this that triggered their shift, their swivel of the face that the U.S. presents to the world. The one outlined by Rubio, understanding that both hegemon and its vassals have transformed demands, new approaches by all sides. When Trump signed a presidential order for maximum pressure on Iran, the Supreme Leader simply said, quote, no, to all talks with the U.S. Trump was just too unpredictable and untrustworthy, Khamenei said. Kellogg's exaggerated claim that Iran is scared and effectively defenseless didn't bring the expected response of talks. It brought defiance.
And to that, okay, I have to add something I saw today. It was one of these little clips from the Times of India. Uh, 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 what clips like this do is they show various scenes and they play some music, okay, and then they print a banner at the bottom of the screen that tells a story. The story that this one was telling, okay, was that the IRGC, um, 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 the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, is now saying that True Promise 3 is back on the table and will be executed um, um, at an appropriate time.
I saw that too.
And so uh, that is consistent, okay, with Iran saying no to talks, okay, with the United States, and then getting ready themselves for a fight uh, um, um, with Israel. Now, there's been a lot of talk that the Israelis are, getting ready to attack Iran. The presentation by the Times of India construed the previous attacks by both sides, okay, is basically attacks um, um, by the Iranians, which failed to get through the Israeli defenses. I did not see the results of those attacks in that way. I think the Iranians clearly demonstrated that they could get through the Iron Dome.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of attacks since then by the Houthis and Hezbollah have shown that the Iron Dome is full of holes and does not work um, um, anymore. In contrast, the Times of India thing also uh, suggested that the second Israeli attack on Iran was successful in destroying most of their air defenses. I don't know where the Times of India got that, because what my sources said, okay, was that there was very minor damage to the air defense system, okay, of Iraq.
I saw the same thing that was very minor.
Right. And also, as far as Alistair Crook was concerned, who has a lot of contacts inside of Iran, his account of it was that also the damage done to Iran was very, very minor. And the major area they attacked, uh, the production of missiles in that area had been stopped, okay, a long time ago. Okay, he had a very good article on that some time ago. So anyway, my expectation now is that if the IRGC is getting ready to fight again, that may well happen soon. Depending on whether the Israelis feel free to try to attack them again. I wouldn't be surprised if the Iranians beat them to the punch. And I wouldn't be surprised if this attack is far more devastating. I've been expecting that for a long time, really. Okay, please go on.
Okay.
I think you started the West insensibility.
Yes, the West insensibility to what is going on in the world and why the world is what it is has been possible because it was partially disguised through the ability of the U.S. in the past era to be able to impose itself on crisis and control the way those problems were presented across the global narrative machine. Trump's Ukraine envoy Kalong said recently that Russia's current sanctions pain level is about 3 out of 10, and that Trump has much more room to raise that pain level by putting sanctions pressure on Russian oil and gas. Quote, you have to put economic pressure, you have to put diplomatic pressure, some type of military pressures and levers that you're going to use underneath those to make sure this goes where you want it to go. The arrogance and misreading of the Russian position in Kellogg's statement is so complete that it brought Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov to warn that Moscow-Washington relations are teetering at the brink of complete rupture. The antagonistic content of Russian-U.S. relations has become very critical today, Ryabkov cautioned. Quote, Washington's attempt to give Moscow demands or to demonstrate the alleged doing of a great favor in exchange for unacceptable U.S. demands are bound to end with failure in the dialogue with Russia. This ominous signal was stated by Rybov despite Russia actively wanting a strategic big picture written security deal with the U.S. about one achieved on equal terms. Ive Smith and Naked Capitalism has cataloged the deep-seated Russian experience and resentment for the West history of duplicity. It runs deep and begs a question whose answer is yet to be seen. The elephant is in the room. Drafting a paper of understandings on Ukraine is one thing, but Russians remain skeptical as to whether it can achieve a process that is written binding, and trustworthy. Behind this lies a second question. Russia can see Trump searching for leverage over Moscow. But time, what Ive Smith called military time, runs to a different tempo to that of political time. Trump wants to end the conflict and be seen to have ended it. The point here is that Russia's slower military time may end with Trump falling into what Steve Bannon warned could be a deadly trap. Too long and you, Trump, will end by owning it, as Nixon ended up owning Vietnam. Trump team members may, at one level, understand the new balance of power, yet culturally and unconsciously, they adhere to the notion that the West and Israel remain exceptional, and that all other actors only change behavior through pain and overwhelming leverage. What did emerge from the transcript of Trump's long call with Putin was that it touched on big issues and did not at all stay captive to the Ukraine issue. Ive Smith puts the elephant in the room issue this way. Quote, it took a full 17 years from Putin's 2008 Munich Security Conference speech, where he called for a multipolar world order, for the U.S. to officially acknowledge via Marco Rubio that the U.S. unipolar period was unnatural and had ended. Let us hope it will not take as long for Russia to achieve a new European security architecture. As the Telegraph avers, quote, this is Putin and Trump's world now.
Okay, and at the bottom of this article, you see a video, by Alistair Crook, okay, and the judge, uh, uh, with the same title or subtitle as this piece, uh, that it's Trump, okay, and Putin's world now. But the video is very different in terms of the specific discussion. Okay, I recommend the video to you. It's very good because Alistair is always very penetrating, as he was, okay, in this article. But he does say completely different things uh, in terms of the specifics of the video. Okay, so it's new information there, and it's a good thing to watch that as well. But we didn't have time to cover it here tonight. I think this article is probably more important in terms of its content than the video was. Okay, at least in my terms, I think the content
Mhm.
is very, very insightful and points up a real problem. Okay, specifically that the problem is that it's very hard, for the negotiators from the American side to get by the cultural problem of understanding that a great deal of equality has developed inside of the balance of power, the new balance of power. Okay, and that they cannot think of the West, okay, as exceptional, and Israel, okay, as exceptional, except insofar as the West, okay, and Israel are exceptional in the sense of the destruction that they've caused, okay, to the rest of the world. But of course, uh, that destruction, one way or another, okay, is coming to an end. Either it will be the easy way for the United States, a gradual change, to more peaceful behavior towards the rest of the world, okay, or it will be done the hard way. But in my view, the United States and Israel cannot stand up to the allied powers, that are starting to emerge, against them. I don't think the United States can stand up in West Asia. I don't think it can stand up, okay, in East Asia, and I don't think it can stand up in East Europe. So I think that the orientation of the Trump administration to somehow retreat to the Western Hemisphere is, relatively speaking, well founded. And it's probably a good thing to do. But I think there, the orientation of the new mandarins of foreign policy have to change because they're still thinking of the world uh, in terms of the multipolar concept of the 19th century. And I think what they have to do is graduate to the Chinese conception, which
Exactly.
is the right way to look at it, and it is the only way for humankind to move forward from here. So,
And with that old way of thinking, since Netanyahu's visit and all, the concept of the threats with Iran, saying that Iran is the problem, that Israel is threatened by Iran, the region is threatened by Iran. All of that, I mean, that's got to stop. Because I mean, Iran is showing that. That's why Iran is showing that it's going to respond, which they didn't respond the last time. They could have, but they didn't. But as they always keep saying, at the right time. But it's here we go again with the fueling up to try to have Iran look like the enemy.
yes, yes, I know. Okay, and I'm afraid that if Iran does continues to be perceived in that way and treated in that way, that it will turn out to be a very formidable enemy indeed, especially since it's backed up by Russia, okay, and China. So there is that. We have comments. Uh, Sandy's, Deg says, let's hope so. I think that might have been in response to Friar Steve asking whether Ben Norton works for RT. Friar Steve also said the U.S. aid was feeding black children in Africa. That's what Elon and Trump hated the most. Don't let white, supremacists lie to you. Uh, okay, I'm not going to discount that statement completely. I'm sure there is no love lost when it comes to the way Elon and Trump feel about children who are dark skinned. Okay, but I think they wanted to dismantle, U.S. aid because of their perception of it as a chief element of the deep state, and I think they are interested, okay, in getting rid of the deep state, or at least converting it to their own ends. Frosties, 100 million food is riding on ships bound for Africa. That's what this is all about, starving Africa. Their hope is that China and Russia will come and put Russia back in the game again. I'm not sure what you mean exactly by that. I think Russia and China are right at the center of the game now and have been for some time. Cowboy Kitty leaves an icon, which I cannot read. And hello, Cowboy Kitty. And Friar Steve says, U.S. aid was America's best mechanism of soft power. Putin is happy. They got rid of it. Putin just sent money to Syria. Okay, I'm not sure that they have gotten rid, okay, of U.S. aid. They think they have, but, things are in court, and we may yet see a reconstruction, okay, of U.S. aid. Though it may be that its role as a regime change agent has ended. If so, that would be a good thing. Thanks to Elon shutting down U.S. aid. Remember, Elon's been in communication with the Kremlin since 2022. To be in communication with the Kremlin is not necessarily to be dominated by the Kremlin, Friar Steve. I think you have to get over that particular notion. Friar Steve says, Elon, they shut it down because of condoms going to Gaza. Trump turned around and said those condoms were being used to make bombs. That information was wrong. It was going to Gaza in Africa. If Elon knew this from the beginning, Elon hates black people. That's why less than 5% work for Tesla management. Well, why do even 5% work for Tesla management if he hates black people so much? But also, yeah, he does, seem to me to be a racist, and he seems to me to be a fascist, so I'm not going to argue with you very much on that question. Doc, I don't see any evidence of any war between Iran and Israel with conventional ground forces. You keep saying it, but it seems impossible at this moment. I'm not emphasizing the conventional ground forces. I mean, I think the attack, by the IRGC on Israel is going to be with hypersonic missiles. And remember, in the Iranian system, the IRGC manages the hypersonic missiles. It's not the regular military forces that control that. It's the IRGC. Frosty says, be careful what you wish for, Doc. Remember, the 1967 war was because Israel was receiving communication of attack leading to to a preeminent attack. Okay, I think you mean a preventive attack, but yeah. The attack on Hezbollah was the same. If Iran plans an attack on Israel, we may be seeing another 1967 war outcome or some decapitation strikes by Israel onto the Iranian leadership, like they did on Hezbollah leadership. Well, Friar Steve, I have a different conception of the capability of Iran, okay, then you will just have to see who is right, okay. I think Iran has the capacity to bring Israel to its knees, and in a renewed contest between the two, that is what is going to happen. Sherry Y says, hi, everyone, at 10:55. Hi, Sherry. Sandy Degg says, hi, Kitty and Sherry. Farsi says, Trump is the weakest U.S. president in history. Once he leaves office and we extinguish the fires he is causing, we have allies in the EU, we have allies in the South Pacific, we have ASEAN. I don't think we have ASEAN. I think ASEAN is right now more friendly to China. They certainly are doing more trade with China than they're doing with us. No one once lived under the threat of communism voluntarily. Communism has changed its spots. Of course, in Russia, communism has been submerged. Chinese communism is a very different kind of communism, but also no one in foreign countries, is living under it. China is currently treating foreign countries far better than we are. And so I think those countries are accepting alliances with China. Certainly in the context of BRICS, they are. And that particular alliance is growing in size. A lot of nations are also joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, remember? Shanghai. So, Doc, I strongly disagree with what you believe on this subject. Okay, well. Yes, it is, Doc. The Kremlin doesn't do anything for free. Well, I don't expect them to do anything for free. Why do you? Doc, nowhere can be won without boots on the ground. Hypersonic missiles will never win a war. Yes, Iran will fire hypersonic missiles, but that will not, win them a war, against Israel. Well, the hypersonic missiles, if they fire 1,000 to 2,000 of them at once, will bring Israel to its knees. And meanwhile, its military forces are occupied in Syria, are occupied in Gaza, and are occupied, in Lebanon. They can do little to blunt an attack from the IRGC. And the size of the IRGC military forces, not just the IRGC, but also the conventional military from Iran, is 3 times the size, of Israeli forces. I agree, boots on the ground are what finally wins wars, but countries can be greatly weakened through attacks of, hypersonic missiles. The economy of those countries can be destroyed. The settlers can be driven out, of parts of Israel. So the population of Jews there can be drastically reduced. And of course, the Iranians will not be fighting alone. They will be fighting along with the Houthis, the Iraqis, Hezbollah, and I think the Israelis are going to have to sue for peace. I don't think Israel will be destroyed, but I think they will have to tolerate a just peace with the Palestinian state. Feisty says, Doc, the best bombing campaign of Germany on England didn't win them the war. It was boots on the ground that won the war for the Allied forces. Boots on the ground, Doc, win wars. That's what history tells us. Yeah, boots on the ground do win wars. But Iran can put more boots on the ground in the end than Israel can. And we can't really help them with that because we can't transport our people over there in sufficient force to make any difference. We won't be able to put the boots on the ground there because the hypersonic missiles will destroy our shipping and our carriers. That's what's going to happen for us, Steve. You can count on it. Okay, let's get to the final article. Which is a rather interesting piece by Scott Ritter. It's called Disarmament in a Time of Chaos, and it's a very hopeful piece that the Trump administration will bring us disarmament. I don't know if I agree with it. He wrote it on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And here is a graphic, a graphic and a music video. It's a scene from Daydreams, a music video about the danger of nuclear war. The music video was produced by Scott's daughters, and one of them is singing in the music video. President Trump says he wants to work with China and Russia on the issue of, quote, slowing down, stopping, and reducing um, the nuclear weapons, unquote. Trump went on to declare that, quote, there's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many you could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over, unquote. He also said he would urge Russia and China to join him in cutting their respective military budgets by half. This is the most important statement made by an American president, in decades, because from this can come a movement to save the world from the threat of nuclear annihilation. But such a dramatic departure from past practice threatens the military industrial congressional complex, the MICC, that massive uh, uh, um, uh, um, uh, uh, monolithic um, edifice to greed and war, which President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned his fellow Americans about in his farewell address delivered in January 1961. To overcome considerable obstacles that the MIC will put in the way of Trump making any progress on his bold world-saving initiative, the president will need to turn to the same allies he relied upon to win the White House back from the deep state that blocked his reelection in 2020, the American voter. From a domestic point of view, Trump faces a two-front war. The first is against the deeply entrenched nuclear war establishment, whose budget and underlying justification thereof has gone unquestioned and unchallenged for decades. The second is a fight over public opinion, which has been shaped by decades of domestic propaganda that make nuclear weapons and their underpinning mission of global annihilation appear to a normal part of the American national fabric. To win on the first front, President Trump will need to combine the tried and true lessons drawn from the experiences gained by implementing previous arms control treaties, especially in the field of compliance verification, with a bold new approach which alters the scope and scale of disarmament so that the world breaks free of dogma, which makes nuclear-based deterrence the norm, and instead puts the U.S. and the world on a path of implementing the visions set forth in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of a world free from the threat of nuclear weapons. To prevail on the second front, President Trump will have to take his case to the American people, holding a series of massive outdoor rallies in states where the nuclear weapons enterprise has fortified itself politically. Such rallies, when combined with town hall meetings and targeted media appearances, can build a foundation of popular support for arms control that can overwhelm the prejudices that have been ingrained in the political DNA of most Americans by the propaganda machine of the MICC. These campaigns should be conducted in concert so that each feeds off the success of the other, creating the kind of political synergy that will be needed to achieve the kind of sweeping changes necessary to walk America away from a nuclear weapons enterprise that can only be sustained by making America an enemy of peace and stability, a nation constantly in search of enemies to justify the enormous expenditures nuclear weapons capability incurs. China appears to have poured cold water on Trump's disarmament ambitions with Zhou Ziekun, a spokesman for China's foreign ministry, declaring that the United States should take the lead in the reduction of nuclear weapons and military spending, noting that China's nuclear arsenal was but a fraction of the size of either of those of US or Russia. But rather than shy away from engaging further, Trump should call the Chinese bluff by working with Russia to extend the New START treaty, the last remaining arms control agreement between Russia and the U.S., for another 5-year period. The New START treaty expires in February of 2026. By extending New START, implementation of what has ceased in the aftermath of the deterioration of U.S.-Russian relations during the Biden administration, Trump would prevent a new arms race between the U.S. and Russia, creating the kind of stability necessary to achieve his broader disarmament objectives. Once Trump re-engages on New START with Russia on New START, he can begin crafting a new paradigm for the kind of global reduction slash elimination of nuclear weapons he seeks. One of the problems with Trump's trilateral approach toward global disarmament is that it ignores the role played by the remaining nuclear armed nations of the world, declared or, as in the case of Israel, undeclared, as well as nations like Iran, which are believed to be on the cusp of attaining nuclear weapons capability. Any trilateral approach towards nuclear disarmament involving the U.S., Russia, and China that does not factor in the impact of the nuclear arsenals of India and Pakistan, North Korea and Israel, or France and Great Britain, cannot achieve its maximum potential for nuclear arms reduction because the impetus for retaining a nuclear stockpile sufficient to deter these outside threats remains. One approach Trump could take is to use his suggested trilateral format not only as a basis for three-way reductions in nuclear arms, but also as a framework for a broader global approach toward disarmament, where the big three nuclear powers work in concert to support regional nuclear disarmament initiatives. For instance, the United States could take the lead in linking the nuclear arsenals of France and the UK into a global nuclear disarmament agreement. Russia could take the lead regarding the nuclear arsenals of North Korea and India, while China could head up the India-Pakistan problem set. I have to say, I don't know how successful China could be in heading up the India-Pakistan problem set unless the Chinese agreed to disarm themselves with respect to nuclear weapons, which in turn would be unlikely unless they knew that the U.S. was seriously disarming itself, because the U.S. and Russia already have such a big lead over China. So I don't know how Scott proposes to handle this, but I'm sure he's given it a lot of thought because he's a pretty deep thinker when it comes to disarmament and other things as well. Balancing the demands for trilateral nuclear disarmament involving the U.S., Russia, and China with those that will emerge regarding the remaining nuclear powers is conceptually too much for the existing arms control establishment to handle. Indeed, one of the main impediments to meaningful arms control is the U.S. arms control community, which has stopped working to eliminate nuclear weapons and instead seems to justify their continued existence in the name of arms control. President Trump will need a new foundation of intellectual development regarding a new paradigm of arms control to embrace if his vision is to be realized. Here he has no greater ally and champion than Tulsi Gabbard, his new Director of National Intelligence, or DNI. Under the umbrella of the DNI, Trump should create a new arms control support staff which seeks to combine arms control specialists capable of engaging in non-traditional approaches to arms control with intelligence analysts who monitor the various geographic-oriented problem sets a global nuclear disarmament agenda would encompass. A national intelligence officer for global nuclear disarmament could be appointed to head the staff, which would take the lead of identifying potential obstacles to achieving Trump's global nuclear disarmament goals and provide analytical support to identify policy leads within the Trump administration so that they could resolve actual and potential issues using the tools of diplomacy. Back in September 2024, I initiated Operation Dawn, a project which sought to mobilize citizen support for preventing nuclear war and leveraging this constituency into producing genuine policy changes. Operation Dawn was successful in putting the prevention of nuclear war on the election issue map and promoting serious policy changes that help forestall a potential nuclear conflict between the United States, and Russia. There's another scene from Daydreams. I am announcing today that I am kicking off Operation Dawn 2.0, the focus of which will be to mobilize public support for President Trump's global nuclear disarmament initiative. This will be done by engaging in educational programs designed to inform the public at large about the danger of nuclear war, the need for nuclear disarmament, and the necessity of effective arms control. In support of this effort, I am pleased to announce that I will be publishing a book on the dangers of nuclear war, Highway to Hell, The Armageddon Chronicles, in partnership with my longtime publisher, Clarity Press. Highway to Hell is the third book in what will become a 3-book series on nuclear war and disarmament published by Clarity Press, the first 2 being Scorpion King, published in 2020, and Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, published in 2022. I will also be working on organizing a traveling panel of experts who will take the message of nuclear war prevention and the need for nuclear arms control on the road to communities around the country to promote a broader discussion on the issue. I will continue to take the lead in trying to provide the antidote to the poison of Russophobia that the nuclear weapons establishment relies upon to infect the minds of American citizens with fear that is then exploited to justify the continued investment in nuclear weapons that threaten our very existence and which President Trump is looking to eliminate. Projects like these do not happen on their own. I am humbly requesting that those of you who so graciously supported the anti-Russophobia work I have engaged in previously and who helped make Operation Dawn the success it was, continue to provide support so that we can eliminate the scourge of Russophobia and bring to fruition the nuclear disarmament vision of President Trump. And for those of you not financially supported my past endeavors, for whatever reason, I would ask that you take the time to reflect on what it is I am trying to accomplish here and how your support could help push me across the finish line, or better said, push us across the finish line. Because preventing a nuclear war and promoting a nuclear disarmament is a team sport. Join the team. Operation Dawn Challenge coin, and that's Save Democracy, Save America, Save the World in November. And another challenge coin, Make Your Vote Count, Say No to Nuclear War, Say Yes to Peace. Those are 2 coins by Scott. And I believe that here is the music video he was talking about. I'll double check that. Yeah.
Daydreams, where do they go when the wind goes whistling down the plain? Color.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that, but you get the flavor of it. It's really a very interesting video and very touching. Okay, and in many ways. But times are fleeting, so I do want to I do want to do some little commentary on this. I think Scott is giving the Trump administration too much credit here in terms of its commitment to nuclear disarmament. I may be mistaken concerning that. If it's a commitment to that cause, it's a sincere commitment, and I will certainly applaud it and give it credit for that particular commitment because it's a very worthwhile one. I understand that what Scott is doing here is writing a blog post that assumes that the Trump administration has a full commitment to nuclear disarmament, a serious commitment to it, and that, in acting in such a way as to believe that they have such a commitment, Scott hopes to bring about assistance both from others and from the administration itself, for his activities, which I think would be a good thing. But also further, he of course hopes to increase whatever commitment exists from the Trump administration to nuclear disarmament. And I have to agree that if Scott were to accomplish that, it would be a very important, and wonderful thing. I also recognize that his life's work, is to accomplish this. That was the reason why he supported Trump and he voted for Trump, because he thought that there would be a much better chance to work towards disarmament in a Trump administration, as opposed to a Harris administration, because he thought that Trump would really make moves to dismantle the deep state. And to some extent, we are seeing that now. But I think the future is still very open. I don't myself see the commitment from the Trump administration that Scott does in terms of disarmament. But I will I will keep an open mind on that and hope that Scott is right. So, oh God.
Well, the one thing with the Trump administration is the fact that carrying on with the same stance as Biden was with Iran. And oh my God, nuclear, the threat to the area and all that nonsense. And, it gets fueled by Netanyahu
Yes,
with
I agree.
no evidence.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. On that, and I don't see the commitment to disarmament there, but we will see.
We'll see.
Keep an open mind about it. Scott thinks it's there. I think that Scott, has been right about a lot of things from the foreign policy point of view. And let's hope that his desire for such a commitment is not clouding his judgment here. And Aristides' Doc, Iraq will never take part in a war against Israel again. No, I don't think Iraq will as a government, Aristides, but there is an Iraqi resistance group which fires missiles into Israel upon occasion. They're not as prominent as that as the Houthis and Hezbollah are, but they have some resources. And if Iran attacks, I'm sure the presence of the Iraqi resistance will also be felt. Aristides said again, Doc, that's conventional ground forces. There's nothing on the agenda that indicates that's in the cards. I will keep looking for more updates from the Iranians. Well, thank you, Friar Steve.
Well, the one thing that has
I will also keep looking for more updates from the Iranians. I'm sorry, Dee, please go on.
well, you've got Israel right now, but they're saying that there's the nerve-wracking is the fact of Egypt is prepared. Egypt had said they will march into Tel Aviv and take over if Israel thinks that, they're going to comply with what Israel wants where Gaza is concerned.
Okay, I think that's true, but I also have to add that uh, in its war against Iraq, the Iranian military proved that it was a very capable military. Since that war, it has had 30 years to further develop. It doesn't have much experience in terms of ground forces, yes, but it has a lot of people inside of the military. It has 1 million people inside of the military. I think that's roughly the size of the Egyptian army, and it's bigger than the Turkish army. So I know Friar Steve wants to sell them short, but I will not. I recognize the main threat from them is that of hypersonic missiles. But once those missiles create chaos in Israel, it will take no time for the IRGC and the regular Iranian army to attack across Syria. There's no force in Syria that can stop them. And the Israelis won't have the troops because their troops are already occupied in Syria. They're already occupied in fighting Hezbollah, which if the Iranians attack on the ground, Hezbollah will attack too, okay, in alliance. And the Houthis are likely to attack as well. It's a long march for the Houthis. But they will make that march if there's a general war, okay, in the Middle East. And as Dee says, I think the Egyptians are up for it too. I think they are up for it too. I think the Turks are up for it too. I think Israel may find itself completely outgunned and outpersoned. I mean, these other nations are well armed. It is not like the previous wars that Israel fought against them. They're all well armed. Hezbollah's ground forces have a lot of experience. And they are very tough for the Israelis to handle in Lebanon. In fact, the Israelis have not successfully handled them. And they've not successfully handled Hamas and Gaza either. They've done tremendous destruction from the air, but their ground forces have not been very successful. I forgot to mention Hamas can attack on the ground also. Friar Steve says, Scott Ritter also takes RT money. Well, he's an author, and he writes articles for RT. Alistair Crook also takes RT money. It's a mistake to fail to evaluate what they say by who pays them. It is not always the case that those who pay for articles are also able to control the authors. I think Alistair Crook is a very independent character. I think Scott Ritter is a very independent character. I think Larry Johnson is a very independent character. I think Ray McGovern is all of these people are very independent characters. And the fact that RT pays the money for articles doesn't mean that they're under control of RT. Also, the money from RT is not covert money. If you ask the people involved what kind of money they get from RT, they will freely disclose what RT pays for articles. RT gives them money for articles. That's all they give them money for. Frosty says RT is a propaganda machine funded by the Kremlin. Well, I think the Washington Post is a propaganda machine, which increasingly is funded by the CIA. Come on. Our governments are involved in funding our news sources. They have been for a long time. From my point of view, I think that RT is a lot more independent from the Russian government than the Washington Post seems to be from the US government. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think it's true. And I think it's even true of the New York Times. I mean, these people have been corrupted by government alliances, by also funding by the government, and by the government giving them a presence at news conferences and very carefully controlling who gets to go to news conferences. There are court documents confirming this. No, they have to register as a foreign agent, whereas the BBC doesn't have to register as a foreign agent because the government of the United States is biased towards the British and because we're hostile to the Russians. That's why RT had to register as a foreign agent, not because of the quality of its articles, not because of the content of what they said. It was because of international politics and the bias it introduced that they had to register as a foreign agent. First, Putin threatens nuclear weapons usage, then tells Trump to get rid of our nuclear capabilities. It was Trump that canceled our last arms treaty that kept Russia from making more nuclear weapons. Yes, it was. It was Trump who canceled the IRBM treaty. If not for the IRBM treaty, well, I guess it's called the INF treaty. If not for the INF treaty that Trump got out of, the Russians wouldn't have been able to produce the Oreshnik missile. They had stopped all work on intermediate range ballistic missiles. And when Trump ended that by getting out of the treaty, they started work again, and the result was the Oreshnik. Fry Steve says, U.S. intelligence service cannot trust Tulsi. Russian media even called her our girl. Now she's their, quote, girl on the inside. Fry Steve, that's all bullshit. Just bullshit. I just don't believe any of that crap. Fry Steve, I'll have to read Operation Proposal by Ritter, see how it aligns with Alexander Dugin's philosophy on geopolitics. The Putin whisperer, we must know our enemy. Russia's our enemy. Oh, Friar Steve, Russia's not our enemy.
I know he's obsessed with that. He is so obsessed with it. It's crazy.
I know. And Friar Steve says Scott Ritter is progression. Correction. Scott Ritter is not progressive. Ritter is pro-Russian. To know what I mean, just read United Russia Platform. That's what Scott Ritter supports. United Russia Platform.
Oh,
I know what Scott Ritter supports. What he supports is disarmament and saving the world from nuclear conflict. That's what he's dedicated his life to. That's what he mainly cares about. Frosty says, Scott Ritter and Tucker Carlson, major similar. I wonder if they have the same Kremlin handler. Oh, Frosty, you're so full of shit about that. I can't believe it.
It's like Fox News, like
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Frost Steve has a lot of good thoughts, but about certain things he's just gone off the deep end, and this is going off the deep end. Trump's views of NATO were the same in 1987. That's when he returned from Moscow for the first time. His wife was groomed by the KGB. What? They threatened her family. She didn't cooperate. She did. Trump has no idea about foreign policy matters, economics, or nuclear weapons. He only understands real estate. Everything else, he's just being told to say. Well, I'm not going to say anymore. I've never heard Egypt say they were going to march into Tel Aviv. They were just quoted yesterday as saying or the day before, that they were going to march into Tel Aviv. I mean, haven't you been reading the news? They said they were going to be in Tel Aviv within a day.
Yes, and that scared the hell.
It does have ground forces on high alert. That's because Trump's threatening to violate the Camp Davis Accord. I think it's because Trump is threatening to violate the ceasefire. Doc, the Syrian army will not allow. What Syrian army? What Syrian army? There ain't no Syrian army. Are you talking about the HTS army? I mean, do you know how long that will take the Iranian army to dispose of them? 6 hours. But you can leave with everyone too. Absolutely no evidence to support it, though. Houthis have never left their territory. Would you like to bet that in case of that war, they leave their territory? They will march to Israel singing songs. They will march because they are religious fanatics. Turkey, Doc. No, Doc. NATO commitment would not allow that. I don't think. In case you haven't looked, there's no NATO alliance with Israel. Turkey and Israel are going to come into conflict in Syria. Turkey's not going to have any problem fighting against Israel. Frosty says, I would love to hear independent thought, Doc. That means not from RT. Well, you're not hearing it from RT. You're hearing it from Scott Ritter himself. That's not the same thing. I mean, you're not reading his articles in RT. You're reading his articles on his Substack. That has nothing to do with RT. I would love to see evidence about the Washington Post, Doc. I can show you evidence about RT being a covert operation for Kremlin. The connection between the CIA and Jeff Bezos in contracts is very, very evident. He has huge contracts, with the CIA, and he's the owner of the Washington Post.
Right, and it's already been brought out to the public.
And ever since he took over, the Washington Post has been changing its editorial line. It now reflects the views, of any administration that has the support of the deep state, and the CIA. I mean, we can see it. We know it. There's all kinds of evidence for it. I can show you evidence about I know that RT is an operation funded by the Kremlin. There's no doubt about that. It's like the BBC. So what? Doc, you can say it, but you can't show evidence. I can. Tenet Media is clear evidence. They took money from the Kremlin. There's a court case. Tulsi is a literal op. Laugh out loud. Exactly, Doc. That is what Putin wanted him to do so that they could make their nuclear weapons. And what do you mean they could make their nuclear weapons? They already could make their nuclear weapons. There was no limit, okay, on their nuclear weapons because the disarmament treaties, okay, had gone away. There was a limit on intermediate range weapons. We got out of that with the support of the CIA, with the support of the deep state. They wanted us to get out of that because we thought we could do better than the Russians in the development of IRBMs. Cowboy Kitty, her cult hates Muslims, yes. Yeah, she's Hindu. That seems to be her running theme. I agree. She is pretty anti-Muslim. There's no question about that. But that does not make her a tool of Putin or the Russians, Cowboy Kitty. Doc, only Putin is threatened to use nuclear weapons in the modern day. We always
What?
threaten, to use nuclear weapons. It's always in the background of our foreign policy. We're always throwing our nuclear weight around. Friar Steve. Friar Steve, no, Doc, I haven't read the news in the last few days. Well, read it. Egypt said they would be in Tel Aviv within one day. Yes, Doc, what's that? Yes, Doc, let's bet. Zionists are celebrating Tulsi's confirmation. Yeah, because, she's anti-Muslim. They're probably celebrating her confirmation. And at this point, she's a Zionist. Yes, Doc, that was in the INF Treaty. Yes, it was the INF Treaty. Absolutely. Okay, I think we're done.
Yes, we are.
So let us say good night. Okay, good night, Sherry. I'm glad you arrived. I think I did say hello at the time. I think you arrived at 10:55. It's always great to see you. And also thank you, Friar Steve, for all your comments. And Sandy says bedtime for Bonzo. Okay, I have a great night, everyone. Thank you, Sandy.
Yes,
Thank
good
you
night,
for your
everyone.
sharing, Sandy, and for your support. And thank you. Let's see. Friar Steve is dominating the
Comments.
dominating the comments. Thank you, Cowboy Kitty. And Lana Dell. Thank you very much, Lana Dell. And let's see. I think we've covered everybody who has come. Oh, Steve Wolfbrand and Dawn Foster. Thank you, Dawn Foster and Steve Wolfbrand and Evelina Pont. Thank you very much. I think we have
Yes,
now
thank you.
thanked everyone. And thank you, Dee.
Yes, thank you for a good show.
Okay.
Covered a lot.
Yeah, covered a lot. Did cover a lot. And it's not even 12 o'clock yet.
Wow, finished early, right?
Yeah, finished a bit early. Yeah. I probably should have played the music video.
But the thing is, I don't want you to get hit for copyright violations or something.
Oh, yeah, I might be hit for a copyright violation if I played that. So,
Yeah. Good night, Friar Steve. He says good night, Dee.
okay. Good night, everybody.
Yes, good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Great show.
Yes, great show. And
Okay.
Joe, what about contributing to your show? You have to buy me a coffee, Joe Firestone.
Oh, thank you, Dee. And also, of course, uh, Okay, what happened here to my,
Patreon.
yeah, generally speaking, my Patreon is up there. Why isn't it up there? Oh, I think that this hi from Dawn Foster is blocking it. So I'll take
Okay.
away that. Yeah, there I am. Yeah, my Patreon account is right up there near my name, patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Uh, that's really the main vehicle for contributions to me, rather than the Buy Me a Coffee account. So thank you, Dee, for reminding me of that. And Dee, would you like to remind everyone of the channels to contribute to you, please?
Oh, it's all pretty. Let me see. I have PayPal, Venmo. What else do I have? Oh, the Cash App. It's all Dolores Pierce. So if you'd like to contribute, we'd be happy.
Okay,
And Joe will be happy.
I will be happy, and Dee will be happy.
Yes. And yeah, tomorrow night, Wednesday, yeah, I'll be on at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, I will probably join you tomorrow night.
That sounds great. And if
Most
there's any articles you want to discuss, subjects you want to discuss, just send them over to me. So,
Okay, I will do.
okay, sounds good. And good
Okay,
night.
so
Good night,
thank you
everyone.
and good night, everyone.
Yes, and good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
And let me get off of here.
Okay. No, I've got to end the stream. If I don't end the stream, it will never